Africa. Africa. And in the west of Africa, Ghana. In the north of Ghana, a town called Bolgantanga. Our story takes place not far from this Bolgantanga. It's about water, which means that it's about life. It's about water, which means that it's about sickness and death. Did you notice that they are all blind? River blindness from the fly. And in this water lurks a snail which carries bilharzia, which eats away the liver. Water gave her guinea worm, and so now she must wind the long white worm out of the wound of her ankle. This baby has dysentery, probably because her mother had no water to keep her clean.
My friends, I've seen already many children with dirty eyes today.
It would be easy to be discouraged, but then you meet Gertie van Noot, who remains rather cheerful after years of working in this region. There are a string of villages through which she moves her mobile clinic.
Is that right?
She sees not just sick people in front of her, but a chance for progress. If only there was clean water to be had.
And you clean it again.
In the dry season, this land is so hot that the saliva dries in your mouth. That girl over there is almost home, with 15 liters of water on her head that she's carried from a muddy hole 4 kilometers away. And at that hole she had waited her turn for more than an hour, while the women ahead of her scooped the slow and dirty seepage. But 6 months later, when the rains come, there's water at the door. Great puddles of it, full of parasites. She now has just a short step to go, with some leaves in the basin to stop the water sloshing. Convenient, but deadly. This bottle of bloody urine shows that the boy Gertie van Noot has just examined does have bilharzia.
Urine with blood. Now usually this is bilharzia or schistosomiasis.
And this comes from a little snail in the water.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
But if you were a boy in these parts and you had no toys but the trees and the water, and the heat was stifling, would you stay out of it because of a tiny snail which carries a worm which goes into your foot and up your leg to live in your liver? Then you urinate, and if you do it near water, the cycle is complete, and your little brother gets bilharzia too. Just for interest, we asked these boys how many were passing blood. So if you are a village woman, you know that most of your day, from dawn on, will be spent fetching water. No matter how hot it is, no matter how tired you feel. This woman walks very slowly because one of her feet is infected, swollen to twice its normal size. But still, she must fetch water. Her husband doesn't believe in clinics, she says. So what happens to this water got with so much pain and trouble? Well, it washes pots, it blends with dung to plaster walls, it may sprinkle a tiny vegetable plot, and it goes in great gallons to make pitot, the bush beer that the women make from fermented millet for their menfolk. Clearly, the water situation here cried out to be changed, for women's lives to be made a little easier. Could wells be drilled? There is water underground, but the region covers thousands of square kilometers with hundreds of scattered villages, and you could not drill for one village without the others. But it had to be tried, and so the Canadian government asked CIDA, Canada's International Development Agency, for help, and together over 5 years, 2,500 wells were drilled in this northern region. An incredible feat. Down 20, 30 meters they'd have to go, where with any luck they'd strike a water table yielding perhaps 20 liters a minute. To the village people, of course, it seemed miraculous. To Canadians and to the Ghanaian officials, it seemed the simplest and most sensible of programs. No pump motors to go wrong, no need for gasoline, just sturdy hand pumps that would go forever on human muscle. But then came unexpected problems. The pumps were working incessantly. Women pumping, children playing. It was a shock to everyone to find that they'd have to backtrack and do a full and serious pump testing program. There would have to be modifications that were worked out with the manufacturers. And for this pump testing program, they had to invent the motorcycle maintenance man, a fellow on a Honda who'd collect the statistics and carry a wrench as well. On 2 different visits in 2 different seasons, we rode him up to the same convenient pump, once in the wet season and once in the dry. It's hard to believe that it's the same spot. This one was convenient, but the trouble is that the pumps can be up to 100 kilometers away on the roughest tracks. The trouble is that there are thousands of them. The trouble is that broken pumps don't get reported in the wet season when puddles are handy. And the trouble is that he and his Honda represent a faraway center, Bolgantanga or some other depot. And this means that the pumps, their workings and maintenance, stay as strange to the village people as an artifact from another planet. In the depot, on these charts, the state of each pump is hopefully recorded. And then his boss gets a report. The time approaches when they must restrict themselves to one design. Development people like to talk of technology transfer, a sort of transplant from rich to poor. But really it's as hard to pull off as a heart transplant. You'd think a pump was a simple thing to transplant, but here a truck must now go out because a rod is broken 20 meters underground, and the whole thing has to be pulled out. And then what happens when the truck itself breaks down? Or the motorcycles need spare parts, for which there's no foreign currency. Nothing can run out of step with its surroundings unless run by foreigners.
That's correct.
So they had to take another tack. Ernie Keitler, who works for CEDA, tells how they decided, in fact, to give the pumps to the villagers.
Well, I think we have the village select a pump man. We have the village, we help to train the pump men. We have the village appoint a water users committee through whom we work to try to look
and how they confronted the possibility that the well might not mean clean water.
For example, the keeping the source of water clean. If you have backflow of water, if you have a lot of people doing their toilet, their business around the well, and it seeps back in the well, it contaminates the well.
This morning, the chief of the Swarungu village has called a meeting of his elders in front of the palace. A little bit of decentralization is about to happen. In fact, a local man is about to be made responsible for the pump. There is some honor attached to the post. And more importantly, he's presented with tools that the Ghana Water and Sewage Corporation have given the chief. And after some training, it will be his responsibility to see that the pump stays repaired. And if seriously broken, reported to Bolgantanga. Now here, one of the motorcycle maintenance men, Andrews, is training the new pump man on the very pump that's going to be his baby. Whether this new program works or not will depend not so much on wrenches, but on attitudes. Will the new pump man be responsible? Will village women report a loose bolt before it snaps? We assume that the women will be keen to keep the pumps going. But is that true? We asked this woman, Victoria, who speaks some English, to put questions for us.
This woman says she prefers the water in the well to the pump water, in that at their place they bury the people in the ground. So as they rot, their blood rather comes out. So the water comes out in the form of the blood, it has color. So when it comes out, it looks red, and because she feels it's blood.
These ladies don't like the new pump. They believe it draws water from down where the dead bodies are buried. They prefer this old well they've had for years, tadpoles and all.
Particles comes out. So she feels it's the urine of the dead bodies, because as they urinate, the urine lies there, and gradually the green particles go over it, and then they come out with the water. So she does not like the pump water, but rather the well water.
Of Jesus! Hallelujah! Amen! Praise the Lord! Hallelujah! Praise the Lord! Hallelujah! Let's give Jesus a clap! Yeah!
It's market day, and in a nearby town, a revival meeting and a public health demonstration compete for attention. Superstitions about dead bodies must be traded in for more valid fears. People have been asked to bring stool samples in those little boxes. Then under the microscope they can see not green particles, but the actual parasites that their bodies carry.
Okay, good afternoon everybody. I told you we shall be here to screen your stools test. About and to find out whether the disease you encounter after the setting of the hand pump is still present.
Now Mike Codozier, an adult education officer, follows the stool test with a little talk. This is the second phase of the new approach.
and to tell you how disease travels, as this picture indicates, how disease travels.
Clean water is delivered by the pumps, but does it actually result in better health?
This man is very sick, so he made latrine in his farm, you can see.
Of course, it will be several years before that question is answered.
And the latrine from the farm had been washed into the river. Everybody, women and children, animals coming to drink water, will take the same disease home. And if you go to latrine, after every latrine, wash your hand with soap.
Pit toilets, says Mike, should go together with the new wells. Ghana Water and Sewerage will provide the cement. He also warns people against going back to the puddles during the wet season, even if they're more close and more convenient than the well. He warns them about covering pure water with pieces of dirty plastic to stop it splashing on the trip home, and against putting this clean water into dirty containers once the village is reached. It was thought before that the wells were being contaminated by cattle-polluted puddles nearby. Now that's not so sure. Anyway, frequent testing must still be done, now and for years to come. A clean site must mean cleaner water. So as well as getting cement for pit toilets, the villagers can also get it for a large concrete apron that can be built around the pump. In the shade of the tall millet, the chief surveys the work. We asked Victoria to find out who they thought owned the well and who the pump man was here.
That is the chief.
Has the pump ever broken down?
Pump le tab saka. It was spoiled twice.
She's furious that it's broken. The pump man says that they pump too hard. So now the pump man will have to let his farming go for the day, and without any hope of rewards, start the long trip to Bolgantanga for a spare part. Amazingly, the truck driver refuses a tip. It's for the lack of such tips that often such trips are not made. Anyway, it's all in vain. There are no spares, and with the rural lobby so weak against the city and foreign currency so short, there may be none for a long time. We checked a dozen pumps at random and found 3 of them broken. Ghana is littered with broken machinery, partly for lack of spares and partly because it's technology that doesn't transplant well. We thought of it this way. Technology which is higher than the skills of the society in which it's placed can't last. It will run down as inevitably as the water of this tower runs down when the tap is opened, down to the surrounding level. So too technology runs down when the human taps are opened, down to the level of the broken pumps over there, under the tree. This is what village technology was, and often still is. A stick that beats to loosen seed. But what about that pump man that we saw going off for a spare part so conscientiously? They say he's good, not a drain on his pump. Andrews, who trained him, takes us to his village. He's not there, but his neighbors show us possessions of his, which suggests that he already had a level of technology as high as the pump. This plow belongs to him. And something even more impressive. A donkey cart with pneumatic wheels.
This is his donkey cart too.
Bob Bannerman is the co-manager of the Ghana Water and Sewerage Corporation in this region. So we asked him if there were some other signs that the pumps were becoming a normal part of the landscape. As a matter of fact, he said, we've just had our first cases of people wanting to buy pumps. And that surely is a sign of acceptance. One of these cases is a woman from the city who comes back from time to time to visit the village that she grew up in. She left here as a girl, went off to become an air hostess, traveled the world, married well, and now she feels she'd like to present a pump to her kinsfolk. Here they line up to express their thanks for all the money that she's going to spend on their behalf.
I feel it's worth paying that for my family.
We wonder in passing how her city-bred daughter feels about her mother's birthplace. Here, 200 people will find one pump 300 meters from their village a great blessing. She lives in another Africa now, where there is running water, hot and cold, controlled by clever little things called taps. Probably for her, taps have become an essential part of daily life. Nobody foresees the day when the people here will have a tap. But we do, says Bob Bannerman, foresee the day when people will pay for the upkeep for their wells, and even for the wells themselves. One could expect a successful city woman to be a modernizing force, but Bob Bannerman's second case came as a complete surprise. He told us about a villager who owns quite a few cows. A drilling program had put a well close enough to catch his interest, but too far away for convenience. Now it was rumored that he wanted to buy a well, so we tracked him down with the help of Albert Aibo. "Excuse this muck," he says. "We have to keep the cattle in the compound at night because of thieves, and after rain it gets a little sloshy." Yes, he does want a well, and it will be his first technology. He's never ridden in a car, turned a tap, nor been to Bolgantanga. Could we take him there tomorrow, to the cattle market, in our car? His family is afraid, but he says yes. Wanting the pump, he's already taken a plunge. If we expected some revelation, dropping a man from the bush in bustling Bolgantanga, we were disappointed. He seemed quite unimpressed by the car ride and by the town. The cattle market, though, that was something else. He was not selling this day, just checking the market. Prices were good. 4 cows would easily pay for the well. Reputedly has 500, so he won't miss them. It was touch and go whether the well got drilled, because there was no gasoline for the rig. But at the last minute, fuel did arrive, and the GWSC team struck water with their first hole. One hopes that the Ghanaian government will value the program enough to make sure that he can always get the spare parts that he needs. Within 2 hours, his gourd was filled with clean water from his own land. Imagine, he says, it was there all the time, but we couldn't touch it. Before we go, perhaps it would be nice for you to meet the film crew. That's Fred Coleman, who photographed the film. That's Sam Boafo, who recorded sound. That's Matthew Adote, assistant camera. That's John Gafacci, assistant director. And that's Barry Howells, who's the executive producer and directed the dry season material. Now for a postscript. We hadn't forgotten the woman with the infected foot. We tracked her down and found that she'd followed our suggestion of bathing it in well water with a little salt added. And now it was almost better. Could there be a better recommendation for the wells?
All right.